Hey guys, I want to talk to you today about training, and in particular I want to talk about resistance versus non-resistance. There is a time and a place for having non-resistant training, having what Craig Douglas refers to as consensual training. And typically we want to do this when we're learning a particular technique, when we're just trying to develop those neural pathways to learn how to go about doing it. And this is something that I talked about before in the past, talking about that comprehension, apprehension, and then condition response. Comprehension being I understand the concept of how to do it. Apprehension meaning I've actually gone through and I've physically done it for myself. And then condition response is the point at which I've practiced this enough that I'm now at that point where I'm able to actually duplicate it. On one side, let's just say way over here on the left, we have no resistance whatsoever. And this is the baby model at which we want to go ahead and start learning how to do things. But over here on the right, we have the other side of the spectrum where the pendulum is swinging all the way over to the right, and it just seems like violence for the sake of violence is the order of the day. It is the necessary component that is left out. And that's simply just not the case. Violence for the sake of violence doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't build in the neural pathways. It doesn't allow you to learn the technique properly. It doesn't allow you to accomplish whatever it is that you're setting out to accomplish. If you haven't even yet comprehended how to do the technique, and you haven't even gone through and put in the necessary reps to practice that technique, the idea that you're going to then be able to do it under massive amounts of violence is it's lunacy, and it's more than lunacy. It's actually detrimental to your training, because the reality is if you introduce stress into an environment that an individual has not yet physically comprehended or apprehended how to do something, you're actually going to cause a regression in their understanding and their level of comprehension. So as we're looking at some of these things, we can look at, the typical no-touch martial arts, and we can see, the kind of stuff that goes on with like the forced choke in order to disarm somebody, and just the typical McDojo type stuff going on. We can see that all over the internet. It's everywhere. But you can kind of liken it to very much like weightlifting, particularly in the area of like Olympic weightlifting, but really just all forms of weightlifting in general, if you want to look at it from that perspective. When we're looking at Olympic weightlifting, there is an actual technique in how to go about doing things like a clean and jerk, or a snatch or a deadlift, and things like that. There's an actual technique to doing it. So you need to start off at a moderate weight until you kind of perfect that technique, and then you want to work your way up. Same thing with other types of weightlifting, bench press, curls, things like that. If you try to move up too quickly, you end up with the same catastrophic result. You end up with absolutely no muscle gains whatsoever, no strength gains, nothing. It's actually detrimental to your progress, and potentially injuring as well. The same thing can be said about combatives. To up the ante, to up the weight too much, too fast, too soon, actually has those same negative effects on your training as well. And I wanted to say that, I wanted to kind of preface that as we kind of look at this video, because in this particular video, we see here a group, I don't want to mention their name because they do put out some good stuff, but this was a good example based on their comments and stuff like that of, in my opinion, useless violence, or violence for the sake of violence. And in this video, you can see here, the guy is approached by one guy. He's starting to get punched. He's getting, thrown up against the wall here. Other guy jumps in. He's starting to get punched now. Third guy jumps in. Now they're grabbing him. They're tackling him. They're literally keeping him up. And he's supposed to be doing what here? I mean, what is it that we're trying to accomplish here? If we're talking about body conditioning, then fine, then that's great. But based on the guy who posted the video, based on his own comments, what the video was supposed to be demonstrating was some resistance training to not being knocked down. But you can see here in the video that Nobody is trying to take him down. Nobody is making any effort to take him down. Nobody's really making any effort to knock him down either. And I understand, again, going back to progressive resistance and stuff like that, we're not just going to go in there and start throwing, unabated knees and elbows and stuff and just try and drop this guy or injure him or whatever. But if the basis of the training is to stay on your feet, if that's what you're going for, then you should probably start off with a single guy trying to take you off your feet. Then move into another guy taking you off your feet, and then another guy, and so on and so forth. But to go toe to toe with 3 guys who are doing nothing but pummeling you and literally holding you up, and then calling it resistance training, is not. It's not training at all. It's just violence for the sake of violence. And it's, on the good side, it's going to instill a false sense of self-confidence. On the bad side, it's going to potentially cause a regression in learning, a lack of confidence in the techniques that this individual is learning, and possibly just turn him off of training altogether. Because he feels like there's something wrong with him because he's not grasping. And this is something that as teachers, we got to kind of rein in and get under control. We want training to be productive. All right, I want it to produce a result, and that result is I want my students to grow and to get better and to learn and so on and so forth. If they're not doing that, then it's a waste of time. If all I'm doing is going in there and beating the crap out of my students, and by the way, there's guys on the internet who do that, then basically I'm just getting off on feeding my own ego versus going in there, ramping up my aggression level to a level that he's able to actually resist, maybe even be slightly productive. And then as he starts to get more productive, I raise my level a little bit. And then gradually we just work the guy up to a point. And that's really what like the belt system is all about. And I know a lot of people don't really like the whole belt system in martial arts, and they feel like belt is just to hold up your pants, and all this stuff. But the reality is that belt lets your instructor know and helps other students to know that too, so that when they go in there, I mean, if you're a white belt and you're going against a brown belt, he should not be going full tilt on you, just annihilating you. It's not good for him, and it's not good for you. It's completely unproductive for both parties, other than just stroking the brown belt's ego. By the same token, if that brown belt maybe looks at that white belt and he says, "Hey, why don't you jump on my back and I'm going to work escape?" So he puts himself in a bad situation. Or maybe he says, "Okay, well, since I'm going with this white belt, I'm going to do a bunch of techniques that I'm not particularly good at. I haven't particularly perfected yet. I'm going to do these techniques, and then I'm going to work on those until I get better, and then gradually I'm going to try that new technique out on a purple belt or a blue belt or something. I'm going to kind of work my way up the food chain, so to speak, until I'm able to actually start doing that technique against other brown belts." And that's typically how I have used the belt system in my own training, but also in training with other guys. That's how I've tried to teach throughout my entire time doing so. So wanted to give you guys a little bit of perspective on training, on resistance, what's good, what's bad, how to go about doing it. Think about it. Violence for the sake of violence is not productive. It's counterproductive. So you guys train hard.